Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of Play Pause Turn. Just as a reminder, in this podcast we discuss all things to do with TV, films, games and literature. We also give our thoughts on any media we've been enjoying, old or new, and we comment on anything topical. So, our hosts today are myself, John, and I've got Alex, and I've got Mark. Now, I'm going to introduce you to both of them. We've heard of Alex before, so we'll go to Mark first today, and I've got a question for both of you, just to get us going on our icebreaker question. Mark, if you could have one superpower, what would it be? And this is going to be a clue to what we're talking about today as well.
I mean, the obvious one is flight, because that'd just be the best thing ever. So I would go flight, but I think the most interesting one is I'd like a bit of a Doctor Strange thing, and I have the power for everyone to tell the truth. So if someone's talking to me, I've got the power to make them say what they're actually thinking. So the ability to tell the truth.
It's a bit of a mixed blessing, that isn't it? Surely.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it's interesting. But I do like flight is definitely the best. But the other one I think would be interesting. Yeah.
Couldn't you get a lasso for that?
I was just thinking that.
Yeah, maybe you could get a lasso or a really big elastic band.
I was also thinking, Mark, both Alex and I don't know if you've seen it yet, we've both seen Chaos Walking.
Oh, no, I've not seen it yet, no.
I really enjoyed it, actually. I mean, I can see why it's kind of a mid-budget film in terms of its appeal, but the main... I don't want to give too much away, but what I'm saying is I'm not sure it is a good idea to know the truth from everybody inside their heads. That's all I'm saying.
I would have said invisibility, but after seeing The Boys, the first series of The Boys, maybe not anymore. It's a bit creepy. So
I was going to say, don't you? Doesn't anyone who wishes to be the Invisible Man? Aren't they just a peeping Tom generally?
Yeah. That's the one. Okay. Yeah, Hollow Man. That's the Kevin Bacon one, wasn't it? That was right. Yeah,
great film. How about you, Alex?
So I've got an interesting one. I'd quite like to be immortal, like Interview with a Vampire Immortal, where I like live a long period of time. And yeah, my wife was a bit confused by that because she's like, "Why would you want to do that?" And I was like, "But the thing is, I was just thinking, like imagine a pension that you didn't have to worry about, like whether you've got enough time to save up a decent amount because you've got like centuries. And so, do you know what? You could put in a tenner every year for two centuries. You'll be loaded like that. I don't know. It just had it in my mind."
Yeah, but being immortal on your own must be quite horrible, I would have thought, though.
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing is, I said this without doing a lot of thought.
I mean, if he's on his own, there can only be one, can't there? If he's on his own, there can only be one, surely. And then you spend your whole time worrying about someone coming around and cutting your head off, surely.
Yeah.
Yes.
True. I mean, so long as they looked after my body, I wouldn't mind.
I can see what you mean about being able to sort of see how history unfolds and go through life, not worrying too much about like looking after yourself, just seeing the world go past you.
Yeah, your concerns would just be totally different because, you know, you wouldn't be stressing about mortal life as much. But you would, but it would just be different. So I don't know. It was a weird one. I just thought about it and thought, that would be interesting. I'd like that.
See, I personally, from a very young age, when I was quite young, I read these books that I actually understood to be. I was a bit. Even then, I missed the time, but they were based on an old 70s TV series called The Tomorrow People.
Oh, I've heard of that. Yeah.
Now, I read all the books first, and then I bought the TV series on DVD. And goodness me, it's low budget and proper. I mean, it makes early Doctor Who look like sort of. Like Marvel films, really, in terms of the special effects. But the stories are really good, and it's about a bunch of kids that, when they go through puberty, they discover they can teleport.
Cool. And
they become these sort of, they become like protectors of Earth.
Was that an Australian series, John?
No, I think it was British. It was British. I would quite like to be able to teleport, mainly because I think it would get past the problem of COVID vaccine passports straight away. Because you don't have to worry about... you can just travel anywhere in the world instantly. I'd love that. I also have, and this is true, I actually have a very bad level of claustrophobia. And so I think knowing I can teleport anywhere will get rid of that claustrophobia straight away as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't think I'd go the Looper way, where I'd end up not Looper, Jumper. You know, the film with Hayden.
Yeah.
Was it Hayden Christensen?
Yeah, Hayden Christensen. Yeah.
Actually, another fairly underrated, fun schlocky film, really. But I don't think I'd go down the route of nicking money from banks. But I think it'd be a really interesting skill to have, teleporting. So that'd be my superpower.
Would you want to do it like Nightcrawler from the X-Men, where he can only teleport to where he can see?
I think you'd have to, wouldn't you?
Well, like, because I'm pretty sure in Jumper they can just go wherever they want, can't he? He can just jump.
He needs a picture once he's.
Does he need a picture?
He needs a picture. He's got a wall of them in his flat, hasn't he?
Yeah.
That's it.
I like the idea of doing the bath thing, Nightcrawler. I like it in blue as well when it goes.
Yeah,
I quite like
the
that.
effect was very good in the films, wasn't it? That sort of cloudy, sandy, cloudy effect. Well, there we go. That's a pretty good little spread of showing our different personalities there, folks, which is really good.
Yes.
Now we're gonna move on to the main part of our podcast, and today the reason we talked about superpowers is because, as I'm sure you have, dear listeners, we have finished watching the TV series on Disney Plus, which is The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And we thought we'd give our thoughts and feelings on the series now that it's finished. As always, we're not going to give a blow-by-blow account of every scene, but we do have some points here we'd like to go through just to pick apart some of the finer details. So before we go into spoilers, and we'll give you a warning for that, what were everyone's general feelings about the show? Alex?
Yeah, I did enjoy it. It took a little while to get into, I think, the first episode particularly. But I did enjoy it, and I think the more I watched of it, the more I kind of got into it and enjoyed it. So I think it gave a useful amount of depth between the two main characters, and I think that's something that we missed a bit for them. So I kind of really enjoyed being able to go into a little bit more detail, which we didn't have before. So,
how about you, Mark?
I was actually the reverse to Alex, so I did enjoy it. I actually thought it started really well. I thought it started strong, and then as it went on, it struggled more and more. So I think the first 3 episodes are really great, and then for me, it kind of goes down quite quickly. Although there are still some great moments, and we'll talk about that. You know, so there's some nice pieces and scenes in the remaining episodes, but it was a bit of a letdown for me, if I'm being honest.
I would say I'm leaning more towards Mark here with my feelings for this. I did enjoy it. I found it. It was a series I was looking forward to seeing. I don't think it for me, and here was the kind of the acid test really was. I didn't see it on the night it's released every week. So if I missed it for whatever reasons, and it was a Friday night it was released over here in the UK. Some nights it wouldn't be until Sunday where I watched it because I wasn't that stoked to watch it straight away. Whereas when it came to WandaVision and another TV series that I'd like to talk about at some point in our podcast, which is For All Mankind, I had to watch those on the night they were released, and I think that's just quite a lot. I did enjoy it, and I as with you both, I did enjoy exploring more of the Bucky-Sam relationship, which we'll talk about later on. And I think the points that we'll rip apart later on as well, towards the end of the series, are what I think I kind of felt it's let down a little bit towards the end as well. But we'll go into that a little bit later on. So let's just warn people now. We're going to spoil this. Obviously, if you haven't watched all 6 episodes, well, why are you listening to this? But if you have, we're gonna now spoil this. So I go through it a bit. But let's talk about the good stuff first of all. So in terms of any sort of standout scenes or moments that you thought were really good, and I'll start with Mark this time. What were your favourite parts to this? And we could, for instance, pick apart Bucky and Sam to begin with. But what did you like most of all, Mark?
So
the good bits.
The good bits. I thought the opening episode, the first scene when he's doing the rescue of the army pilot, is a fantastic set piece and was a great way to start the show. I think that's one of the best ones that they've done for a long time, so I loved that. That was really great. Other standouts for me, Zemo was great, but you know you're going to get that because Daniel Bruhl's just so great and he was so good in Civil War. I think White Russell is an absolute revelation as Walker, and US agent stroke new cap, because I think that's a massively, massively difficult role to do, and I thought he did it brilliantly. Again, we'll go into that. For me, he was the best thing in the show. I thought he was fantastic. Other things that I liked is, as Alex said, I alluded to earlier on, it did allow for Sam and Bucky to breathe as well. So they give him more time, with Bucky, here we go to see the psychiatrist, and you get that great scene of them two, both with her in the second episode, which is great as well. It gives them more time to develop as characters, so you don't always have that amount of time in the films, particularly like in things like in Infinity War and Civil War. They don't really have the time to get into them. So I did like that, and it gave them all a bit more of a bit more time to develop, a bit more time to breathe. I did like that. Anthony Mackie is always brilliant. I love him. I'll watch anything that he's in. I think he's fantastic, and I enjoy. I forgot the guy's name now who plays Bucky. Sebastian Stan. Yeah. So like in them two, I got great chemistry. I liked it I thought the start it was like a Lethal Weapon sort of aspect they were going for. Don't really like each other, but they're best mates sort of thing. So there's a lot there to like, and we'll get into more. But those for me are generally the highlights.
How about you, Alex?
Oh, it's a good question. So yeah, I mean, I personally loved the dynamic between Bucky and Sam a lot. For me, that held it together. I think if that wasn't there, I think it wouldn't. Obviously, it's in the title, so it's fairly obvious. But I think if that wasn't entertaining, if there wasn't a tension between them, if there was, I don't think it would have worked. It's not a buddy cop kind of thing. It's literally, they've got a really complicated history, and they happen to be in the same line of business essentially. So I really like that, and they've both got history that they're trying to deal with. Particularly Bucky, I loved his storyline and the book he was working through, and honestly, I think that kind of gave him depth that we'd seen in previous films, but we hadn't had taken the time for it. And I think that was the thing that I enjoyed, because with all these streaming things, it's going to take you off on a strand rather than necessarily holding up on its own. Otherwise it'd be its own movie. So I feel like this was a exploration of that. I really enjoyed that they kind of widened the world slightly with Madripoor, because that's something that we hadn't seen before, and visually I really enjoyed that, and I think it opens sort of some doors onto things that weren't there before.
Well, there were some X-Men references where there was the bar itself.
Yeah, the bars from X-Men.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that. It's like, and what I liked particularly was, as you went through the episodes, you'd see little nods to certain things. So you could tell that they put attention into what they were doing. They weren't just focusing on the plot and saying, yeah, you don't need to know anything else. They had gone to that level of detail.
Yeah, Marvel are very good at world building, aren't they? I mean, that's very obvious. I mean, one thing you've got to remember with these series is, always hold at the back of your mind, is they're always setting up. Whatever you watch, whether it's WandaVision, they're setting up their next film and their next series. So you've got to be aware going into these series that you're never going to get closure on everything, because they're always going to want to keep going. And Marvel, so I listened to a few interviews of some of the actors, and White Russell was talking about how he was auditioned for his role as John Walker, and when he auditioned, they didn't initially tell him who he was going to be. They gave him and Marvel do this. They'll write a script that's not part of the series as a test audition. And when he did that, and they were very pleased with him, they started to kind of drip feed him his role. And he was like, oh, you want me to be Captain America? Surely that's already been done. And so towards the end of the show, everybody was thinking that Wyatt knew what was going to happen next, but he has no idea, because Marvel tend to not plan too far ahead. Although obviously you can see
Well,
that in all their shows that there is a plan, there's a core plan.
yeah,
But I think they're very careful. They do a very much look what happens, look what the reaction is, and if it's popular, we're going to keep going with it. And I think that's very in terms of a business, that's a very clever way of doing things. It's like a DJ playing music. You look at your audience's mood to see how you move on, and I think that's really interesting. So, I agree with both of you about the dynamic between the two gents, Bucky and Sam. I really enjoyed the way they started off at each other's throats, quite catty, and there were little nods to the films about where they were sitting in the car and things. But then you could see that relationship soften, and obviously because they were working under very dangerous circumstances, they kind of bonded together, and it was lovely towards the end. Really nice, especially in episode 5, I think it was, or maybe 6, when Sam and Bucky were discussing, as you said before, Bucky's his list in his booklet of all the people he killed whilst being mind controlled, and how honest Sam was with him about what he has to do. You have to not avenge, you have to amend. And I think that was one of my favourite storylines. But I also just enjoyed little moments. For me, actually, ironically, for this series, it was the quieter moments I enjoyed the more. I mean, episode 5 I thought was my favourite because of the way it dealt with that storyline. We'll talk about that later on. But it was really interesting just seeing how they dealt with those actually quite topical, quite sensitive issues in a really interesting way. And I was thankful because there'll be a whole bunch of people watching this who didn't tune in to watch and learn about something. They watched for flying and bashing up. But actually, they will have learned something about this and grown, I think, as an audience. And that's really, really good. For, let's be honest, for what a lot of people think of as, a superhero series, it could be seen quite superficial. I think they've done a really good job of removing that superficiality from this sort of genre. But yeah, in terms of the storylines, this is going to be a long one, I think. In terms of what was being told to us narratively throughout this series, what were your feelings on this? And we'll start with Mark again with this one.
That's right. I'll just point out as well, I don't know if you've seen the first trailer for Shang-Chi that's coming out this year.
I have, yeah.
So Madripoor is in that. So there's shots of Madripoor in the Shang-Chi trailer. So that's a place they're going to go back to in that film.
One of the biggest concerns that a lot of people gave in terms of feedback to the Madripoor episodes, Mark, was for somewhere set in Asia, there were very few Asians in the actual location. And I think that will probably be addressed in Shang-Chi, the film. But if you look at it, they go to the bar and the streets. It is diverse, but there's very few actual locals being shown, and it is a big problem in the film industry is representation of diverse cultures. And ironically, they had a real good chance here, and I think Marvel have taken that on board, obviously. But it's a bit ironic, isn't it? Really.
Well, the thing is about Madripoor in the comics is that it's a pirate, it's a pirate state.
Yeah, it's a kind of a hub of.
Yeah, it's a hub of everyone. So it's not, or because it's basically like. It's a fictional place, but it's based somewhere in Asia. But it doesn't mean that everyone lives there is Asian. But I get what you mean.
I know what you mean. Yeah. I mean, obviously, we got a limited view of the locations. We didn't go on a tourist trip of Madripoor. We went to a seedy bar or two, didn't we? And a few containers in the docks. So I know what you mean. Sorry, Alex. Sorry, Mark. Do carry on anyway.
No, that's all right. No, I mean, the arcs are sort of pretty obvious as well. I mean. On Sam's, it's his initial reluctance to take the mantle, but then obviously, like it's foregone conclusion that he was obviously going to take it. Like I guess he was going to take it anyway, because obviously in the comics he becomes Captain America.
I think you need to view this series though, Mark. You need to view this series as if you've never read the comics before.
Yes, that is true. Yes.
Because Disney or Marvel, as you've seen from WandaVision, have a tendency to give their fans more by changing the themes. I think it's a good idea. I think you've got to be careful about trying to, predict or appreciate from the comics. You've got to treat this as a separate product, really.
And for Sam, what I found interesting was obviously he rejects the mantle. Then he sees what it becomes when he's done that, and he's seen not necessarily damage, but what that shield represents in the wrong hands. And we can go into what Walker does. And obviously, it's a journey from Sam to realising yes, he should take it as well. I mean. what I thought is that like what a lot of films do in this kind of thing when the hero realizes he has to step up or has to do something is that they normally do it by by a main event. So if they kill like the buddy off, like in Top Gun, for example, or there's one event that changes them,
the emotional hooks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So so they do one thing to make them change and do it, but they don't do that here, which I think is really important, and I think which is much more interesting is that it's all right. It's 6 episodes as well, so it's not a film. But he gradually comes to realise it by what's happened in actions. You know, he doesn't like. It's not like his mate dies, for example, and then he's right. I've got to now become Captain America because he died, so I've got to order.
I do think that scene was a tipping point for him, though. Really.
Yes, yeah, and I think it's the realisation there, and then stuff with Azai that we'll get into as well. You know, he sees like that side of what America was, and some degree it still is. So it's not just like one thing that makes him change and become Cap. It's a gradual evolution of him, and that's what I enjoyed about his arc.
That's good. Alex, did you have any sort of standout themes or threads running through the series that you enjoyed?
Well, I think there were a few, but I loved how topical and relevant it was. There were lots. I mean, some of it did feel a little bit like, oh, they've put that in. You know, it's like this vote and the bombing around that and that kind of thing. I thought, that's a little bit injected in there because that's a bit topical. But you've got to be aware that this was written way before it's been released, because obviously this was 2 years ago.
Of course, yeah.
And we'll talk about the order of the series later on in the show. But the initial storyline for this series was that the Flag Smasher or someone was the big bad had a very dangerous virus that they were going to release as a blackmail to the globally. And obviously, with the pandemic coming in, they had to do a big rewrite, quite a comprehensive rewrite of the series, and that has affected, I think, how it sits narratively, and we'll talk about that later on in our concerns with the series. So I think, to be fair, they've done quite a good job to rescue it, but I think we can see elements of this series that were probably filmed that were meant for other things.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
I wouldn't be surprised if that scene at the end with the UN was actually near the beginning of the series, if that makes sense. And I think they've used that footage, not used the footage, but they've used that theme elsewhere because they've got that set up. So yeah, I think you just got it is a different series to how they planned because of current affairs and current events.
Yeah, I mean,
sorry, Alex, go on. No. Sorry, you still doing your point. Excuse me. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I mean, I think it held up quite well. Like you can see some things have gone on the cutting floor, and yet it's still holds up as a storyline. So I think that was okay. I think it's just, I think we didn't really appreciate like the downside of like the return of everyone, and I think this does a job of trying to portray that, but it's probably not quite done it well enough. And I think that partly that's to do with the cutting, because I think probably the edit was a bit clearer beforehand. Maybe they had to just rebalance it towards that because that's all they had to work with. But yeah, it was kind of. I mean, I still think it was quite good. I loved the dynamic between Sam and his sister Sarah. I thought that was really good. It gave him some real heart, which was great.
Like that scene in the bank where he's trying to get a loan for her.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which again is a real thing that happens. I mean, you know, famous Black American footballers have done similar things, and they've been rejected but still been asked for their autograph. I thought that was very, very clever.
Yeah, it was very relevant. Go on.
Well, I'd had an issue with that. Like, I appreciate it's a commentary maybe on like an everyday life and that, but like from a story narrative point, and everyone argued this when the first episode was released and everything, I don't really understand that scene. I know what it's trying to do. It's trying to reflect sort of our modern day, but like the idea that Stark didn't sort everyone out financially before he died, doesn't make sense to me. And again, John, you said about like no fit in the comics and that, it's commonly accepted that all the Avengers earn six figures from being Avengers.
Yeah.
And so the idea that Sam's not got a lot of money, I understand why that scene's in there. It's trying to make a commentary on things. So I thought they did it really well when they're arguing in episode 2 and the police ask Bucky, is this guy bothering you? Which is a big sort of commentary on relationships.
Mark,
in the US.
I think that scene is important because it builds the picture of, on a meta level, of so many scales, of the injustice of black people in America.
Yeah,
and I think it was,
which
it was
totally
part
get.
of the main thread. I think they had to show that.
But that doesn't really. But that's not. Yeah, I understand what they're doing with that, and again, I accept that and it's important. But that's not representative of who Sam is, though, and like any circumstances. That's just. I think that scene was put in there for politics, not as part of the story.
I
disagree. I disagree because I think it is part of the story, because the whole story was talking about, on every level, the government experimenting on black soldiers on the level of Sam being disregarded as Captain America when he gives this, like, they didn't even say, no, Sam, you should be Captain America, keep your shield, we'll support you. No, they took his shield, put it in a glass case, and then a day later, or a few days later, rolled John Walker out. Yeah. On every single level, what it was showing was, doesn't matter how much help you've done to the country, you've gone out and fought for your country in a war or as a superhero. When you come back, you're a commodity that's been thrown away. I think that was really important to show for the series, and I think a lot of people, whether they're black or of any colour or any race, will sympathise with that situation entirely. And I think it was a really integral, clever, core part of the story they were trying to tell. And I think if you're worried about Tony's inheritance, I don't think Marvel are going to go that deep in backstory and worry about it. I think this situation is created to make a story, and therefore they don't have to explain themselves. Does that make sense? Yeah.
It just, for me, it just seemed like, I get all of that what you just said, and absolutely, and that for me it's just like, for continuity, it just seemed a bit sloppy to me. I don't know. It's just because it's just like he wouldn't be skinned. And I know why I did the scene, and everything you just said I agree with totally. But the fact is that there's no way is he going to be. But the thing not have money.
In this story, he is skinned, and that's the story. You can't just wish that it didn't happen, because this is how they've written it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but like, there's no. But again, it's me being the comic nerd versus me watching on the TV. Like none of them are never skinned. like none of them. It's like Peter Parker has this thing about him being skinned, and then he's not. And look, it changes in the comics all the time, right? One time someone's rich and then they're not. Like Stark's lost his fortune a million times, right? And Daredevil started to fight as homeless person. So everything changes. I'm not saying that, but like, in this continuity, there is no reason for Sam to need a loan. And I know why they've done that scene. I'm just saying that in regards to the story and the character, and in that universe, that's not something that he would need. But I understand why they did it as well. I'm just trying to say that's all.
Alex.
So I think for me, there's two separate bits. So there's the storyline of Sarah and Sam doing up the boat. And for me, it was Sarah going to the bank to get the loan, because you've got to remember that, even if you've got a famous brother or a famous family member, she's fiercely independent. And, for her, it's more about community than it is about money. So she's like, what can you do for me? I can get you money. And it's like, no, but come with me to the bank. That's how I saw it. The piece around Bucky and Sam, where they get called up by the police, is the commentary in my mind.
Yes.
And for me, that's relevant, but it's a clear nod. It just doesn't hurt, because it kind of reinforces the problems that we have in America and everywhere, really. But like, that didn't detract from the storyline. I think but Sam and Sarah's tension is because, Sam should be able to sort it, should be able to just solve the problem, and he can't unless he literally does the work, like unless he actually spends time fixing up the boat and actually really doing the graft. And that's also what's good about it.
Yeah, and actually you say that, Alex, you make a point there, because that then reflects the message he's trying to impart on Bucky.
Agreed.
You can't just go out there to the people you killed and say, hi, let's be mates. You've got to do the work, and you've got to do the hard work, which is take the blame for what's going on, and not seek to make yourself feel better. Go and make amends with them and make them feel better. And so Sam learnt that from working on the boat with his sister, and you can see him growing in the series, and he realises this, and he then imparts that same understanding onto Bucky. And I think we should give the writers more credit than they've got, really, because there's a lot of nuance in this that you just wouldn't normally get in a superhero series. And yes, I had my issues with it, but I really thought the writing on some levels was really good. I really enjoyed the whole super soldier serum sort of theme through it, and how it kind of revealed, for me it was a real revelation that actually, although Steve Rogers is, I would say, the ideal good guy, and this series really does demark that. You can see from John Walker how good Steve was compared to John Walker, and they did that intentionally. It created that sort of black and white between them, the different styles of being a captain. And I think it was really interesting to find out that even though Steve Rogers was a good guy and did a lot of good things, his existence was still based on the back of some horrible treatment of black soldiers. And in this series, this was inspired by real events, the Tuskegee syphilis experiments. And I thought that was really clever and really well done as well, really sensitively done. And it was my favourite narrative through the story. We're going to talk about the pacing in a second, but for me, there was lots going on in this series, but I really liked this core theme of the shock of finding out that Steve Rogers was actually, again, not entirely perfect, how he came to be from the past. And actually, in some respects, what difference was there between the American government and the German Nazis? Because that they would have done the same thing if they had the chance to. And that's really interesting. Don't take sides because both sides are bad. It's almost like The Last Jedi, isn't it, again?
And don't talk about that film.
There is a tension, though, isn't it? It's started to become like the organisation behind it is the problem, is the bad thing, which actually, has been skirted over completely in other things. You don't think about whether it's a positive organisation that's putting a Captain America in place or whatever. You don't think about that, but we were forced to think about it a bit in the episode.
The nearest parallel I can think of had that feeling, that tension of the government. They're running him out on a wagon to show the people that they've got a hero. The parallel was Steve's first tour. When he went out to the with all the singing, the entertainment people to all the different bases and things, and doing the old was it war bonds scheme he was doing, trying to sell war bonds to the masses.
Paying for the war.
But obviously, this is now much more kind of the whole military-industrial complex, sort of bringing everything out at once. Really interesting. Now, I think there's going to be a few points here. Let's talk about our concerns with the series. I know, Alex, you liked it more. So Alex is going to fight the good fight here. But Mark and I, as you heard from the beginning of the podcast, we had a few concerns with this. Now, I'm going to have constructive criticism here, chaps, please. Let's not get mean about it. I still really enjoyed this. But I do think there were some concerns with this series. Mark, what were your thoughts on this?
So the big problem for me in the series was the villains. Not Walker. We're going back onto him, but the Flag Smashers. Now, I do think, as you correctly said, John, about the fact that they had this whole thread storyline about a virus being released. I mean, I don't think I can see why Disney got rid of it because they're Disney, but I think it's harmed the series too much. I think everyone knows this isn't real life, I think they should have kept it. I think they had to be brave. That's another thing as well. some parts of the series frustrate me a little bit, being a bit too safe, but we'll get there. But so yeah, the Flag Smashers to me are a bit underdeveloped. They don't really seem to be much of a threat. You don't really see them use their abilities that much, apart from a few scenes. They're just really underdeveloped, and they don't. I can't remember the name of them. I just about remember Carly's name because she's called Carly, but other than that, I just thought they was really underdeveloped and weren't really much of a threat, to be honest. And I was just really frustrated with that because it just didn't work at all. And
I think you're right. I think it's their motivation I had concerns with. Why were they doing this? Because
the motivation I thought
someone
was
on
right.
Twitter said something like their biggest concern was the refugees were unhomed and they were being moved from border to border. But someone made a good point on Twitter, which was, surely if there's been a snap, half the world's houses are empty. So when they came back, there shouldn't be a housing issue because it's the same number of people that left. Although that's not entirely accurate because you'll have 5 years of procreation in between. But
yeah,
I do agree with you. I think I struggle with the motivations. Well, why were they doing what they were doing?
I think their point was, so my interpretation, and you can feel like to correct me if you want, is like they'd built a better, they'd built a better life in those 5 years between the snap and the blip, and they'd moved on, and they'd got a better life for themselves. And then when everyone come back, everything that they'd built in those 5 years, their communities and their homes, have all been taken away from them, and that's why they're fighting. I think is their main point. There's a very in Spider-Man: Far From Home, they use this as quite a jokey way, but Aunt May says that when she come back, there were people in her house, as an example. But that plays it for laughs, but this is a bit more serious. So I think the fact is that people have just missed it because when they're blipped back, everyone just goes back to where they was at that time. You see, so you're going to get strangers in your house, people who thought they were widowed or widowers, suddenly they're coming back, and all that's really interesting. And we saw some of that in WandaVision, and we get a bit more of it here as well. So I think their motivation was, well, we've built ourselves, and we shouldn't lose all this just because you're back. We should all be equals. I think is their motive.
I mean, the GRC.
That was my interpretation.
The global the Global Relocation Council? The
GRC.
Yeah. I mean, that was kind of packaged as almost as a Gestapo organisation, wasn't it? It was very sort of big black vans and military and packaging.
I thought at first it was supposed to be like a UN, but it just...
Well, but I think what they were showing, I think what the Flag Smashers' concern was that an organisation that was meant to help, like the Red Cross or the UN, was starting to turn into just another military organisation, And again, I think that's a nod towards the general attitudes towards the police, especially in the States right now. I mean, I think I agree with you, Mark. I think they didn't get enough time to develop their story. Was there anything else before we move on to Alex that you want to talk about?
I mean, I think the pacing, but I think that's all that we were going to talk about as well. I struggled a little. I thought the first 3 episodes were really, really great, as I said at the opening. And then I just thought it dragged, for 6 episodes, considering that Wanda was 9. I thought this dragged a lot, unfortunately, as well. And, I think
that's really interesting, because I enjoyed episodes 4 and 5 the most, myself. They had the most emotional impact. I mean, for me, the standout ending scene with John Walker's bloodied shield.
Yes, that's
in the whole world is watching. And also in Truth, which does lay down all the storyline of the black soldiers and so on. For me, I thought those 2 episodes were my favourite. I think because I was a bit more immersed in the storyline. I became more involved than. To be fair, the first 3 were very much, almost spy films, weren't they? Sort of jumping around and actiony. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Alex, how about you?
Yeah, no, completely. I think. I mean, you're right. I think the Flag Smashers plot line was the weakest part of it. In my mind, I was agreed. Although I feel like we didn't really get, and perhaps this was intentional, but we didn't really get a good understanding of the what the GRC was trying to accomplish by the vote. It just seemed like it was reining back, putting up walls when it didn't have walls before, and then it just reinforces Carly and the Flag Smashers like one world, one people mantra, and I think we almost forgot that in certain bits, like particularly when she blew up the depot or whatever it was.
Yeah,
with the people
inside it. Yeah,
it was kind of like, oh, hang on, that's not very one world, one people, is it? So I do think there were some real problems there. That said, I enjoyed it. It felt like I had to work to kind of understand the motivations behind it and kind of keep up with the plot a bit.
There are lots of stories in it, weren't there? Really, I mean, you've got the Flag Smashers storyline, you've got Black Captain America, you've got Sharon Carter's unveiling of who she is. A lot of people guessed that she was a power broker a bit earlier.
We've got to talk about that in a minute as well.
Yeah, we'll do. We've got John Walker's sort of rise and fall, and then sort of semi-rise again.
Yeah.
We've got Bucky's, redemption story, and I think they're all really good stories. And I think there's just not enough episodes in a series to develop them all. When you look at, I've been watching For All Mankind, and we'll go into that another time, and that's a 10-episode series, and I have to say that's not enough people talking about that series. It's a masterclass in development, writing, and character development. And I think it's a shame that we only got 6 episodes, albeit the last episode was probably 2, really, because they're about 50 minutes long normally, aren't they?
Yeah.
So it's almost a 7-episode series. And I just feel like, and I really enjoyed the series on the whole, I feel like the last episode was a real disappointment for me. I was very disappointed by that silly sort of Scrooge, Bill Murray to the camera-esque monologue from Sam in front of the senator and the cameras about, let's change the world, and suddenly after his speech the UN do a U-turn, and I just found that really, it was almost like, quick, let's just get this over and done with. It was a bit rushed.
Yeah, this is the last episode.
The final episode,
and I think that was actually a weak bit. Although it ticked a lot of boxes, it was very, very much like, no, we're just doing the simple stuff now. We're not doing any of the depth that we built up. We're not going to talk about that. We're just going to have Sam say the right thing. Which it did. Yeah, I don't know. It was quite powerful, but I think it could have been better.
Let's get to the red, white, and blue elephant in the room, shall we? Now, I know when you look at someone like Captain Marvel, her suit in that film I thought was excellent, and that suit was actually based on Jamie McKelvey's design, who's a comic book artist that I'm a big fan of. He did The Wicked and Divine, among other things, and he did a Captain Marvel variant cover, I think, for one of their comics in Marvel, and they used his suit that he designed for the film. And actually, he was invited to the premiere as well. I've met him a couple of times in comic shops. That was great. And I think they've got so much talent they could draw on. And yet, Captain America, the new Black Captain, Sam's suit, I thought was awful. Considering how reluctant he and Isaiah was. And we haven't talked enough about Isaiah Bradley, but we may not have time to.
Him, yeah.
Considering how emotionally developed they were and how they were reluctant to pick up the shield. And I think at one point Isaiah does say, "Oh, you got into that suit then, did you?" But God, it was awful. And it looked like a G.I. Joe action figure. And I could not. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. And I'm sure. Anthony Mackie loved wearing it, but the headpiece was just. I kept thinking, how's he turn his head? It's like when you watch Batman, when you watch Christian Bale playing Batman, say he must never turn his head left or right in those films. It just doesn't strike me as an iconic design. What were your feelings on the suit?
Yeah, so I personally hated it, but then that's because I've not seen the comics, and so I looked at it and I just don't think white leather works. Like, I think that's a general rule. Like in cars and on suits, white leather, it's not really working.
It's very Las Vegas show with two white lions style, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think I can see it as...
It needed rhinestones.
Yeah, it is. Yes, it's an evolution of the Falcon suit, so I kind of understand it.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably what would have been helpful is, yes, they made a huge unveil of it, but really what would have been nice is if you'd have kind of done a little bit of backstory or gone to Wakanda and had a little bit of a dialogue where it's like, well, it's got to be like this, and no, it's got to be like,
get Shuri on the case.
Exactly, because the thing is that it just kind of felt planted, whereas actually there was reasons behind it. There was, and they just needed to kind of say, no, it's done this way because of this. But
Killmonger and T'Challa's suits were amazing, and they also evoked that kind of the African culture. And I know the reason that he's in the red, white, and blue is because he's American. He's an African American, not an African.
Yes,
and
that's right.
So they had to celebrate the fact that he was this mix of African and American. But I do think they could have brought in a few more Wakandan elements because their style's pretty good. I was expecting, because the episode before, he got given that suitcase, didn't he, from Wakanda, and a lot of people were speculating what was inside, but there were wings on the outside. So I've no idea what people were confused about that. But I was expecting more of a chrome suit that maybe was completely made of vibranium and did cool things like Steppenwolf's outfit did in Justice League. So my imagination was really like, oh wow, it's going to be like all metallic and bulletproof and cool. Because at the end of the day, Sam has got to hold his own with people with superpowers.
Yes.
And I really thought the suit might be giving him more invulnerability, and it just seemed like a Evil Knievel with wings. You know what I mean? It's a little reference there for people who are a little bit older, by the way.
Mark, what do you think?
Mark.
So they get plus points for being comic accurate. So, and
there we go.
And to be fair, from 20 years ago, when we had the first X-Men film, when they was all wearing black, and we're like, you can't do comic accurate comics, and you can't do comic accurate costumes. It looks stupid. To where we are now, so they deserve definite plus points for getting it comic accurate. John, I think, hit it as hit the nail on the head. To be honest, I think it might be you, Alex. Sorry. The suit is fine from feet up right until the stomach. Everything's fine. The problem is the top half. So his mask, or or the cowl, what you want to call it, doesn't look. It looks awkward, and there's too much white. That's bang on, right? There's too much white in it at the front. It needs to be a little bit darker. So anything, I like from the bottom up, it looks really good. But the problem is the mask, I think. I'm actually looking at it now as we're talking.
Bucky's wearing a leather jacket, and he still looks cooler. He's just wearing a leather jacket, That's the problem.
I like the suit, but the face
even
mask...
Even John Walker's evil suit is better than that. His US agent suit.
I think it was, it's fairly comic accurate, but it just doesn't quite look right up top for me. And I think they'll change it when they're doing Captain America 4. So I'm sure it'll get a redesign again. And I think they'll scale it a bit more like John said, like in the Wakanda style and that sort of thing. And again, the big problem for me with Falcon's costume anyway is that he's got the wings, he's got everything, but then the top of his head is always bare. So if anyone's has got a sniper, you can just shoot him in the head anyway. So that's always bugged me about superhero outfits that show part of their head. There's a reason why Batman's got a cowl, all right, or cat.
I mean,
do you think,
Mark? Do you think if they'd given him a helmet in the shape of a falcon's sort of beak and head, it would have looked all awesome, like a sort of a Japanese Gundam suit? But that's almost a bit too DC, isn't it?
That would have been a bit DC.
And maybe they're reluctant to do that.
To be fair, Sam's never he's always looked
is he?
He's always looked the way he looks in this is the way he's always looked in the comics, to be fair. He's had different suits, but he's always had that mask the way he is. So if you had covered his whole head, it would be a massive departure. I guess you just got to suspend your disbelief, obviously, in that. But that's always a big thing with me, with superheroes who don't have powers, but somehow haven't got any like head protection. Sort of same thing with Black Widow and Hawkeye, to be honest. They could just get shot in the head really easily, but they don't, because they've got no head protection. But anyway, I digress. the suit was great apart from the top bit. But I'm sure they'll fix that.
So that's it in a nutshell. The suit was great apart from the top bit. Okay.
Apart from the top, apart from the mask and too much white, but the rest of it is.
Alex, you've given us your thoughts, haven't you?
Yeah. No, I think it's. Yeah, I don't like it, but I think it's what I want to do is care about it, and at the moment I don't care about it.
Yeah. It's just a bit silly, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, so obviously we've really gone down deep into the story and things we've enjoyed. In terms of filmmaking, how did you feel about that? In terms of the cinematography and the way it was presented, what were your thoughts on that?
How do you want to go? Or shall I?
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed it. I mean, I think it had highs and lows. There were some moments, particularly when you had John Walker doing that killing, that it was just honestly that gave me shivers because of how it was done.
Well, it was the angle of the shot because it was a low angle looking up at him.
You were doing it from almost from the victim. You were doing it like that. No, I mean there were a few moments like that which really stood out to me. Not all of them. Like there were areas which were a bit meh. Some of the running around underground or in the building site. It could have been anywhere. It was probably an LA lot somewhere. But anyway, that wasn't great. But
you have to remember with Emily Van Camp, who played Sharon Carter in this, she was also filming another TV series called Resident, and so they were very limited. They had to juggle her filming schedule with the other TV series and this one, and so they were limited with locations and what they could film.
Yeah.
So actually, one easy way to film an action scene is just to go to a pile of containers, because that could be anywhere in the world, couldn't it? Do you see?
Yeah.
So they could film that and say it was in Madripoor. So there were limitations, but I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I think for me, honestly, I think it was well done. I didn't feel like they had scrimped on things. It was
definitely Marvel production value, isn't it? Yeah.
I loved the closing soundtrack at the end credits. It was really, really nice, and it had like a kind of feeling of a sort of what's the word, like late night detective show or something.
Yeah.
Then it added the like strums of like this is a superhero thing, and I just really liked that, and it just finished off the episodes really well.
Yeah, I have to take another listen to that now, because I think near the beginning of this series they used a song that was originally Captain America's theme, but it was kind of played in a different way.
Yeah, that was for Walker's introduction. That's right.
To kind of show that he was different. So there's some clever use of music there. I mean, I did miss one thing I liked about WandaVision was the way they used different songs at the end to reflect what was going on. And I think they can get away with that because of the nature of the show. But you have to sort of match your mood. I agree. I think the framing of the series is very good. It was very high budget, which was what we were looking forward to. I like the fact that the series ended with a very clever action scene with a helicopter and him and Sam communicating with the politician that could fly a helicopter. That kind of bookended the opening.
That's quite handy, that wasn't it?
Yeah, it was quite handy. But I mean, it's showing you've got to get a bit in of the Falcon and his drone doing things, and but it was nice how that final scene bookended the first scene in the series, which you mentioned, Mark, over the valleys. The retrieval scene. I thought that was interesting. I'm not sure if it was intentional, but it was quite clever. Any thoughts about cinematography or soundtrack or anything else about filmmaking, Mark?
Well, I was just going to. As you mentioned, I thought the opening scene in episode 1 was fantastic. So the way that was filmed and the way that was done, it looks absolutely fantastic. It reminded me a little bit in a way of, do you know there's a chase scene in Mandalorian second season. Is it when he goes in the clouds and they're trying to, I think it's the two X-Wings are trying to find him.
He lands up on the planet with spider ice and spiders.
Yeah, it sort of reminded me a little bit like that, the way it was done. I just thought the way that was done was...
It's very Top Gun, isn't it, really?
Yeah. And it was about Madripoor, and I just thought the cinematography in that episode was absolutely stunning.
Well, I mean, it's the production values. Of
the
sets
and then the lighting of it was really well done. I liked it when they were in the bars and in rooms. It reminded me a lot of as a film with Ryan Gosling, who and the director of Drive, Nicholas Verne, something, and it's called Only God Forgives. and it does, and it's all very like stylized and like glossy, and the way it was done, it reminded me of that. It was like of the Underworld, and I thought that it looked beautiful. I thought that.
Yeah,
as well.
I mean, it could be cool. You could also draw comparisons with John Wick, couldn't you?
Yes,
aspect.
exactly. Yes,
Yeah.
So I thought all that looked really great as well. And production values were very high. It felt like a film, so it didn't it didn't feel like a TV series when you were watching it. You know, it looked like it was part of the Marvel MCU, like, you know. So no, it was really good. Those particular are the two bits I really loved in it. Yeah.
Okay, and I think looking at our time, we might have to skip ahead here. We have had a long discussion about the actors, and I think overall, I think the quality of the actors in the series was excellent. That's the thing about Marvel; they can get the actors, can't they? Because
they're brilliant at casting.
We haven't mentioned much about Carl Umbley, who played Isaiah Bradley. I particularly, he was one of my favourite characters in this series because of the way he's just his acting ability. I mean, you think about the difference between him playing Isaiah Bradley, and he plays a much older man than himself, and then you think about his performance as Martian Manhunter at the end of DC.
Yes.
Quite a
it's a massive difference,
different there. I thought he was excellent. I really enjoyed that final scene with his statue in the museum as well.
Yeah,
for me, he was my favourite. Really, was Carl Umbley. But very very briefly, because I'd like to do a bit of speculation before we finish off. Was there any single standout character you really enjoyed, Alex?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, I think probably Sam held it up really well, personally. So I think he obviously that was his role. He had to do that, but he was steady and calm throughout it.
Yeah, I mean, he was basically good Captain America material, wasn't he?
Yeah, and that's it. So I mean, I know it's pretty obvious, but yeah, I think it really did hold the series up very well.
How about you, Mark?
I can't not be on this podcast and not talk about Wyatt Russell as John Walker, who for me is just by far the most interesting and best character in this. He's the one that I always have an affinity for bad guys anyway, or the ones that everyone hates. The actor actually got death threats after the second episode in real life.
Mark, Marvel did ask him, like, do you realise you're going to be hated for this?
Yes, yeah.
And Wyatt said, no, that this is an interesting role, and I relish the idea of portraying this character. You know, most people like enjoy playing the villain, don't they? Let's be honest. It's, you know, without, I mean, obviously he wasn't a moustache twirling villain in this series, but he was definitely a. No, I agree. I was very impressed with Wyatt Russell. Very impressed. Yeah. He has been in other films. So it's not a
Outlander. I think
a new thing for him. But
stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, the great thing about him is, and again, it was talked about Steve and the great symmetry is that Walker is the perfect soldier. Okay, so where Steve and Sam are the perfect man or the perfect person, you know, like. If you're going to war, as great as Steve is, don't get me wrong, you know, but like you want someone like Walker next to you. That is the perfect soldier, and that scene after his partner dies, you know, and he kills one of the flag smashers.
Battlestar, his partner.
Yeah, Battlestar. Sorry, I forgot the name. Yeah,
yeah.
Like it's a good moral.
Is it Lamar?
Yeah, Lamar. Sorry, yeah, thank you. There's a great moral question there, and you know, like what he did was obviously wrong, but Madam Hydra, I might get into her in the predictions. You know, she says like no one like thinks that guy didn't deserve it or thinks you've done anything wrong, but you got filmed doing it. You know, and that's kind of you got caught, and that's kind of what an agent does, or is they're under the microscope, you don't see them, and they do the dirty things that you don't see.
Isn't it, basically?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly, you know, if that was my best friend who just got murdered by someone, you know, and I was there, would I take revenge? I don't know, maybe probably I would. I don't know, you know. That's not excusing what he did. Obviously, because you're Captain America and you can't do that. Steve would never do that. Sam would never do that. But a soldier in war probably would, and that's why I thought that was quite interesting. And the great thing about him is that like he's a douche, but he's a douche who thinks he's doing the right thing. Like Steve's a bit of a nerd, really. Steve is wholesome, but there's a bit of a nerdy side to him as well. He doesn't really get it, you know. It takes him forever to kiss Like Sharon,
Maggie.
for example.
Oh, Sharon, yeah.
Sharon, like in Civil War, like he finally, like, look, if finally does it, and that end scene with Walker when he turns into US agent, he's like, I'm back,
I'm back, baby.
Well, yeah, well, you're not really. No, you're not. You're just gonna, and we'll talk about what he is, but that's what he thinks he is. And
the difference, Mark, the difference between Steve and John was that Steve was the little guy who hadn't known
power,
success,
yes,
who wasn't power, and so he kept that with him when he became Captain America, and he kept his humility. Whereas John Walker was his decorated war hero who did see some distressing things in his life, and he does reference that in the hearing at the end. You built me. This is why he couldn't see. He could not see why he'd done anything wrong.
No, he was trained for this. That's right.
Yeah,
he was trained.
exactly.
This is not my fault. I am being. This is being made an example of here, and it's really interesting you say that, Mark, because pretty much that mirrors what Wyatt Russell has said himself about how he perceived the role. And actually listening to him, I listened to him on a podcast. He convinced me. He made me feel more sympathetic to the character after hearing his background and understanding of the character. So yeah, I agree. It's a really intriguing character, and we're going to see more of him, aren't we? As well.
Yes.
Speaking of which,
yes,
and that's my segue into the next section. What's going to happen next? Now, first of all, Mark, don't get carried away here.
No,
I don't think Marvel are going to, for the sake of the non-comic viewers and the families and people who are less invested in the comics, I don't think they're going to overcomplicate this storyline. Although it's pretty complicated already in this series, I think they're going to go for the big hits here in terms of what they can do next. So we'll start with Mark, because he knows more of the comic knowledge. You're a bit more granular about this. What are your thoughts for season 2? What do you think's could they do next?
Right. So there's two things. First of all, can we just talk about, before we get into that, can we just talk about Sharon, please, as the power broker?
Yeah.
And how that makes absolutely no sense.
Well, hold on here. I think it was hilarious. Her walking out of the temple, the judiciary meeting, like she's still in the corridor on her phone going, "Wow, now I'm an evil person. I've got a way into the government now, and you're all going to be able to pay me lots of money for all their secrets." Like with all these people walking past with their office suits on. She didn't even leave the building before she's going, "Wah ha ha ha,"
Like
that was moustache twirling almost. Wasn't it, really.
So that her as a power broker makes no sense to me for many, many reasons. Firstly, and feel free to interject in here. Firstly, why does she do what she does in Madripoor if
Alex,
she's the power broker?
On this?
So
you're right, but I think it's because that's the thing, isn't it? You kind of think, great, we got the power broker. And then you're like, well, hang on, were you the power broker all along? Then who was this person? No, you're right. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Also, I never really felt like she was that bitter about it. Like,
here's her motivation. Here's her motivation for being this bitter, right? So
I can't believe we haven't talked about Zemo, by the way. But there we go.
We'll talk about. We can talk about Zemo in a second. So she helped Captain America and his gang during Civil War. She helped them do what they needed to do. Okay, now she then became an enemy of the state and had to run and hide. In the meantime, with all the events that happened at the end of Infinity War, those other people were pardoned and like everything's fine. Here's the Sokovia Accord, but everything's fine. Whereas Sharon wasn't. All right. She got a little kitty from her uncle, because by the looks of things, with all the timelines, Captain America's probably her uncle anyway. But you don't see anything of him looking after her after all the problems, the blip and everything else. He didn't even say hello to her. I think, here's the first theory, I think she's very, very, very bitter about it. And she may be doing, the first motivation was she was doing all this, almost like she's undercover to get a pardon, which is what we see in the series. But I think she's so embittered by it all that she's had that same tipping point that John Walker had. All right, or there's a third theory here, and the third theory here is that Sharon Carter is actually a Skrull.
No.
Oh, that's a clever
Because
one.
we have got Secret Invasion coming, haven't we, as a series?
That's good.
I don't.
And that makes everything else much more sense in the fact that she almost had superpowers when she was biffing them all up in the yard with the barrels and things, the docking containers. So I don't know. That's one particular favourite fan theory that's doing the rounds. So let's just hold that thought and see what happens. I don't know. I think, like I said before, I think that's too complicated for vanilla Marvel fans, really. But anyway, any other thoughts about that, Alex?
No, I'm not going to comment on
that.
that. Honestly,
I'll just say a couple of things. Sorry, so I don't understand why she's Power Broker, because she introduced him to the guy who's making the super soldier serum for her, and they kill that guy.
Well, she wasn't with them, was she? She came down afterwards.
But she's letting Zemo be in there with them. It just doesn't make any sense. If she's the Power Broker, why did she set up a meeting? She could just say, "No, I'm sorry, I can't get you in there." Or she would. Or if she doesn't want them to know she's the Power Broker, why doesn't she set them up so they get killed?
She could have played her cards better. That's the thing.
Yeah,
maybe.
Her as the Power Broker to me makes no sense. My only hope is that she isn't the Power Broker and that actually she's a bit of a double agent at the moment. And this goes into predictions that she's actually working for the US, really. So she's a double agent. And really, she's working either with Ross or working on the Thunderbolts. That's the only thing.
So you're saying that she was on the phone? She was on the phone to Madam Hydra at the end there. Is that what you're saying?
I think it's either Madam Hydra or it will be Ross, Thunderbolt Ross.
Yeah.
So shall I explain what the Thunderbolts are? Or
he's the Red Hulk, isn't he?
Yeah. So the Thunderbolts are kind of the Marvel version of the Suicide Squad.
Suicide Squad. Yeah.
So they're run by General Ross, who's played by William Hurt in the MCU. So there's a long series. So Thunderbolts are basically the Suicide Squad. So it's mainly comprised of villains from the Marvel Universe who go on missions. It is basically a rip-off of Suicide Squad, really, so Thunderbolts. But there is another section called Dark Avengers, and this is going a bit long, but I'll try and be quick as I can. So Secret Invasion, which John just talked about, is a story...
Settle in, folks. Settle in.
Yeah, settle in. I will be as quick as I can, I promise.
Popcorn.
Yeah. So there's a story called Secret Invasion in the comics, okay, which is what they're doing a TV series of. I'm not sure it's going to be exactly like this, but it was through this big story, it resolved that a load of Earth's heroes have been replaced by Skrulls, and the Skrulls in the comics are normally evil, whereas in Captain Marvel they were flipped to being good. There are good and bad Skrulls in the comics, but they're mainly bad. So there was a big, massive fight and there's a big thing of who's a Skrull, who's not a Skrull, and Spider-Woman turned out to be a Skrull. Because
they're shapeshifters, aren't they?
Yes, they're shapeshifters, Skrulls, who are Captain Marvel. Yeah. So
they can embed themselves in society because they can shapeshift.
Exactly, which you'll see in that series.
Hence the name Secret Invasion.
Indeed, yes. You're on the ball.
I got that bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's worth a read if you want to read it. It's a really good series. So anyway, I'll be very, very quick. So there's a big battle at the end, and Norman Osborn, who is the Spider-Man villain, the Green Goblin, and is head of Oscorp, he kills one of the lead Skrulls, and he's declared a national hero. So he gains control of S.H.I.E.L.D. and he becomes new director of S.H.I.E.L.D. because Fury is seen as a bit of a failure. And Stark goes away. Stark is presumed dead. There's a big thing about that. So basically, Norman Osborn becomes the head of S.H.I.E.L.D. and he creates a new Avengers, and it's called the Dark Avengers. He uses Stark's tech, becomes the Iron Patriot, which is the character that Rhodey was in Iron Man 3 as well. And then he leads a team of evil villains who are supposed to be the Avengers, but they're called the Dark Avengers. So they're for example, in the Avengers you have Spider-Man. In the Dark Avengers you've got Venom.
You've got two Suicide Squads now.
Yes.
Essentially.
Yeah. The Thunderbolts are separate to Dark Avengers.
And do they do shifts, or do one do a night shift, one do the day shift?
Yeah.
And one clocks in and goes down the cafe for a break, and the other ones come in, or
it's 24/7.
Are they at odds with each other? Are they competing? Are they competing for different contracts with the government? I mean, there's so much to do here. You can take from this.
Well, no one knows there's Secret Avengers or Dark Avengers. That's the whole idea. So I think a lot of that, or aspects of that, will come into Secret Invasion. That they're going to do Armor Wars as well. I think Emily Van Camp may well be in Armor Wars that they're going to start filming this year as well.
I mean, we're down the rabbit hole now, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yes, which I won't talk about Armor Wars now. That's fine. But so I think there's a lot there. They're also doing an Ironheart series as well, which is Riari Williams,
So,
who
Mark,
is the new.
but we're going a bit off topic here. And
Sorry. I'll stop talking now because my sad knowledge of comics. Sorry.
I mean, yeah, we're obviously let's summarise. We're obviously going to see some more of Sharon Carter. We're going to because that's kind of alluded to. We're going to see more of the US agent and Madam Hydra, and potentially Baron Zemo is going off to the raft, where I'm assuming some of the Thunderbolts are. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Okay, so we're going to see some sort of, and whether that's a TV series or a film, we don't know.
No.
Because I'm at the back of my mind, I'm also aware that there's this new Doctor Strange film. There's also this new Loki series, which I don't know how they're going to link to the Loki.
Yeah.
I think Loki's my parents' dog's name. Sorry. So there's lots going on. I mean, will you be watching them for a start?
Oh God, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And do you think? Okay, money on this now. Do you think Sharon Carter's going to end up being good or bad?
I think she will be good in the end.
Okay. What about you, Alex?
No, I don't know. I can't keep up. It's just is she good? I don't think she's going to stay bad. Because
no.
I think the thing is, if you're a villain for a series, you're going to get your comeuppance and then you're going to be kicked off. So they want to keep her a bit longer. They're going to have to do something else.
Do you think Captain America, Steve Rogers, will come back to deal with this at any point?
No, I don't think Steve Rogers is
because I know Chris Evans has alluded to coming back.
I think he might be around for flashbacks and stuff, but I can't see him for anything else.
Like, there's a campaign at the moment to get Tony Stark back to life, isn't there? Like,
I saw that. Yeah, there's some banner somewhere, isn't there? Oh my goodness!
Like, I love Downey Jr. Adore Downey Jr.
I don't think he wants to come back
in the role, and I like Chris Evans. Both of them, I adore them. But I don't think they should. I don't see the point of everything like Infinity War Endgame. If you're going to get them back, all right, you can go to different universes and multiverses, and maybe go and visit them before they died or before they went off and that. But I think they're done now. I think their arc is finished, and I don't, maybe they have the cameo, or maybe Downey Jr. is the AI for Ironheart or something like that. Maybe they'll bring back in cameos.
That'd be quite funny.
But I think they're done, and I think they need to move it on a bit more now. As much as I love them dearly, both.
I think what we've learned from the Snyder Cut is that you shouldn't listen to fans.
Oh, now see, I was on the Snyder Cut episode, so I'll just say now that I love the Snyder Cut. But you do that.
I know, I was baiting.
Yes, no, I know.
Okay, I think we're going to round it up there, boys.
Yes.
I think that's, again, awesome points from both of you. Thank you so much for your thoughts. I've learned a lot this episode, especially from Mark and his arcane knowledge of the comics.
I do apologise for being a nerd, sorry, yes.
Mark, now I don't have your Twitter handle here. Would you like to share your Twitter handle? Or
I do not do Twitter, I'm afraid. No,
that's for the best.
It's all right. You can always talk to Mark through the play, pause, and turn Twitter handle. So
yes, please do. Yes, happy to answer any questions or anything like that. But I don't personally use Twitter though. No.
That is at play, pause, turn. And I'm at John PR Evans. And Mark, Alex, you are
at Alex Hansford.
Alex Hansford. And you can also go to our website, which is at playpauseturn.show. And our podcast will appear there. But obviously, you can also search for Play, Pause, Turn in the podcast player of your choice. I understand we're on Spotify, we're on TuneIn, we're on Amazon Music.
Woohoo! I think Pocket Casts. We're getting on.
We're going to be on iTunes
them.
very soon.
We're everywhere.
Banks is going to be doing a picture interpretation of our podcast at some point as well. And there's going to be a cameo from our podcast in the next series of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So we're everywhere, hopefully.
We're working on it.
It's been great chatting to you both. Thank you very much. This has been Play, Pause, Turn. Thank you for listening, and good night, chaps.
Good night. Thanks a lot. We enjoyed it.